Some folks think broken things ain't worth fixing, that a cracked cup holds no water, a bent nail serves no purpose, a spirit shattered into 1,000 pieces can never be made whole again. They're wrong, of course, dead wrong. But I didn't know that yet when she stumbled into my life. The thing about despair is that it's quiet. It doesn't scream or rage or make a scene. It settles into a person's bones like winter frost, slow and creeping, until one day they wake up and can't remember what warmth felt like. That was her, all frost and silence and eyes that had seen too much and still somehow managed to be empty. She'd lost everything. Her husband of 23 years to a fever that swept through the valley like the wrath of God. Her only daughter to a man who promised her the world and left her with nothing but a broken heart and a child who never drew breath. Her home to the bank that didn't care about grief or God or anything except the bottom line. And then she found herself on my doorstep, soaked to the bone from a storm that seemed to follow her like a curse, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small leather satchel clutched to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this earth. I didn't know her story then, not all of it. I just saw a woman who had stopped fighting, who had surrendered to the weight of her own existence, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, I opened my door. The storm hit around midnight, and I remember thinking that it had a mean streak, the way it howled through the canyon like something possessed. I'd seen my share of mountain weather in the 40-odd years I'd been working this land, but this one felt different, angrier, like the sky itself was grieving something. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at the ledger books that never seemed to balance no matter how many times I added the columns. The ranch was struggling, had been struggling for 3 years now, ever since the drought came and stayed like an unwelcome guest who refused to take the hint. My cattle were thin, my fences were falling apart, and my savings had dwindled to damn near nothing. But that night, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was thinking about the sound of hooves on the road, faint beneath the howling wind, and the shape I'd glimpsed through the rain-streaked window. At first I figured I was imagining things. The mind plays tricks on a man when he's been alone too long, and I'd been alone a very long time. My wife Clara had been gone 12 years now, taken by the same fever that had swept through the territory in '84, and I'd never quite found the strength to open my heart to anyone else. The ranch kept me busy, kept me from thinking too much. But there it was again, the unmistakable rhythm of a horse moving at a walk, slow and deliberate, like the rider was too exhausted to ask for anything more. I pushed back from the table and crossed to the window, wiping the condensation from the glass with my sleeve. The yard was a blur of darkness and rain, but I could make out the shape of a horse standing near the hitching post, head lowered against the storm. And there, slumped in the saddle, was a figure so still I almost thought they'd died right there. I grabbed my coat and lantern, yanked open the door, and stepped into the chaos of the storm. The rain hit me like a wall of ice, soaking through my shirt in seconds. Wind tore at my hat, nearly ripping it from my head, and I had to squint against the stinging needles of water. The lantern sputtered and threatened to go out, but I shielded it with my body and pressed forward. The horse looked up as I approached, a sturdy bay mare with a blaze on her forehead, shivering and exhausted. She'd been ridden hard and her sides were heaving, but it was the rider who drew my attention. A woman. She was dressed in a man's coat, too big for her, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips. A soaked wool hat was pulled low over her brow, and her face was pale and drawn, lips blue with cold. She didn't move when I called out to her, didn't respond to my voice at all. For a moment, I thought she was dead. Then her head lifted, slow and heavy, and I saw her eyes. Lord have mercy. I've seen a lot of things in my life. Seen men die in accidents, seen mothers bury children, seen the kind of poverty that strips a person of their dignity. But I'd never seen eyes like hers. They were the color of storm clouds, gray and distant, with nothing behind them but a vast emptiness that made my stomach clench. "Ma'am," I said, my voice barely carrying over the wind. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling to focus, to remember where she was and why. Then her mouth opened, and she said something I couldn't hear. "What's that?" She tried again, her voice cracking and thin. I need a place." "To stay," I finished for her. "Of course, let's get you inside." I reached up to help her down, but she was already moving, swinging her leg over the saddle and sliding to the ground. She landed heavily, her knees buckling, and I caught her just before she fell. She was lighter than she should have been, her body frail beneath the bulky coat. I could feel the sharp angles of her shoulders, the prominence of her ribs. She'd been starving herself, or she hadn't been eating at all. "Come on," I said, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Let's get you inside before you freeze to death." We made it to the door, stumbling and slipping on the mud, and I half carried her across the threshold. The warmth of the house hit us like a blanket, and she let out a small, shuddering sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. I guided her to the chair by the stove, the one Clara used to sit in when she'd been alive, and lowered her into it. Then I knelt before her and pulled off her boots, which were soaked through and falling apart at the seams. Her feet were like ice, blue and mottled. "Stay here," I said, grabbing a blanket from the chest near the window and wrapping it around her shoulders. "I'll get you some coffee, something warm." She nodded, but her eyes were already closing, her body giving in to exhaustion. I moved quickly, building up the fire in the stove and putting the kettle on. As I worked, I kept glancing over at her, studying the sharp angles of her face, the hollows beneath her cheekbones, the way her hands trembled even as she tried to still them. She was young, maybe 40, maybe less. But grief had aged her, carved lines into her skin that weren't supposed to be there yet. Her hair, what I could see of it beneath the hat, was dark and streaked with gray, pulled back into a tight bun that looked severe and practical. I didn't recognize her, which meant she was probably from somewhere else, somewhere down the valley or maybe further. The nearest town was a day's ride from here, and the people who came this way usually had a reason. I had a feeling hers was a bad one. When the coffee was ready, I poured her a cup and brought it to her, along with a slice of bread and some dried meat. She looked at the food like she didn't recognize it, like it had been so long since anyone had offered her anything that she'd forgotten what it meant. "You should eat," I said gently. "You need to get your strength back." She didn't argue. She picked up the bread and bit into it, chewing mechanically, not tasting. The coffee she drank in slow, careful sips, wrapping her hands around the mug as if she needed something to hold on to. I sat across from her, giving her space, letting her come back to herself in her own time. The wind continued to howl outside, rattling the windows and finding its way through every crack in the old house. But inside, the fire crackled and warmth crept back into the room. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Finally, she set down the mug and looked at me. "Thank you," she said, her voice still rough but stronger now. I didn't know where else to go." "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Are you in trouble?" She laughed then, a hollow sound that held no humor. "You could say that." I waited, not pushing, letting her decide how much to share. "I lost my husband," she said finally, 3 months ago. Fever took him just like it took my father and my brother before him. I nursed him for 2 weeks, did everything I could, but it wasn't enough." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "He was a good man, a kind man. We had 23 years together and I thought," she paused, her throat working, "I thought we'd have more." "What about your family, your children?" Her face crumpled just for a second before she got it under control. "I had a daughter. Her name was Martha. She died 2 years ago. She was carrying her first child and something went wrong. The doctor said there was nothing he could do." 2 years ago," I repeated, doing the math. You lost your daughter and then your husband. 2 years apart almost to the day. She shook her head slowly, a ghost of a smile on her lips. I don't believe in signs, but that one felt like something. What happened to your home? Bank took it. I couldn't keep up the payments, not with my husband gone and no one to help me. I tried, Lord knows I tried, but it wasn't enough. The bank manager, a man named Thornton, he offered to let me stay if I would be agreeable. Her voice tightened on the word, and I felt a cold anger settle in my gut. He wanted a woman to warm his bed, is that it? She nodded, her cheeks flushing with shame. He was a married man, but that didn't seem to matter to him. He said I'd be well taken care of, that I'd never have to worry about money again. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. Good, I said, surprising myself with the heat in my voice. You did the right thing. Did I? Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something besides emptiness in them. Pain, yes, but also doubt. I walked away from everything. The only home I'd ever known, the only life I'd ever had. I have nothing now, nothing at all. You have your life, I said, that's something. Is it? She asked, and the question was so quiet, so sincere that I didn't know how to answer. The rain continued to hammer against the roof, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. The stove ticked and popped, sending warmth across the room. And we sat there, two strangers bound by nothing but circumstance, and I watched her struggle to hold herself together. I don't know what I'm going to do, she said eventually. I don't have any family left, no friends who can take me in. I thought about just riding until the horse couldn't go any further and letting whatever happened happen. Suicide, I said bluntly, and she flinched. You're talking about suicide. I don't have anything to live for, she said, and there was no defiance in her voice, no self-pity, just a flat, matter-of-fact acceptance that made my blood run cold. My husband's gone, my daughter's gone, my home's gone, what's left? You tell me, I said, what's left? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her searching for an answer that didn't come. Finally, she shook her head. I don't know. The honesty of it cut through me. She wasn't trying to be dramatic or manipulative. She genuinely didn't see any reason to keep going, and that scared me more than anything. Why did you stop here? I asked. Out of all the places you could have gone, why here? She looked around the room, taking in the worn furniture, the faded curtains, the photographs on the mantelpiece. I saw the light in the window, she said. I wanted to feel warm one more time, to feel something besides cold and hunger and grief. You wanted to feel warm, I repeated, my voice thick. She nodded, and something in her expression shifted. For a moment, just a moment, she looked human again, vulnerable, real. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have come here. I'm just bringing my problems to you, and you don't even know me. Nonsense, I said firmly. You needed help and you found it. That's how it's supposed to work. But I can't pay you, she said, and the words came out desperate, almost pleading. I have nothing, not a single coin. I spent my last money on the train and I rode from the station to here. I can't pay you for anything. I didn't ask for payment. She stared at me, uncomprehending. But why? Why would you help a complete stranger? What could you possibly get out of it? I thought about that. Thought about all the reasons I could have turned her away. The cost of another mouth to feed, the work of caring for someone else, the risk of becoming attached to someone who might not survive. But I'd been where she was. Not exactly, no, but I'd known grief. I'd known loss. I'd known what it felt like to wake up in the morning and wonder why you even bothered. And I'd survived. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe because I've been where you are. Maybe because I know what it's like to lose everything and keep going anyway. Maybe because I've been alone for too long and I'm tired of it. She blinked and I saw something glisten in her eyes. I don't understand you. Most people don't, I said and smiled. I've been told I'm an acquired taste. A ghost of a smile flickered across her face. It was small, barely there, but it was real. "Thank you," she said again, and this time the words carried more weight. "Thank you for not turning me away." "I'm not going to turn you away," I said. "You can stay as long as you need. We'll figure out what comes next together." She nodded, her shoulders sagging with relief, and I could see the exhaustion pulling her down. She needed sleep, needed rest, needed to let her body and mind heal from whatever she'd been through. "Let me show you to the spare room," I said, standing and offering her my hand. She took it, her fingers cold and bony in my grip, and I led her down the hallway to the small room that had once been my mother's. It was simple but clean, with a bed that had fresh linens and a window that faced the east. "There's a basin and water on the dresser," I said. "I'll bring you some clean clothes in the morning. For now, just rest." "I will," she said, standing in the middle of the room looking small and lost. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," I said. "Samuel Cole, but most folks call me Sam." "Thank you, Sam," she said. "My name is Alina." "Alina," I repeated, liking the sound of it. "Welcome to my home, Alina, and don't worry, we'll get through this." I left her there, closing the door gently behind me, and went back to the kitchen to clean up the mugs and put away the food. The storm was starting to ease, the wind softening to a whisper, and I could hear the first tentative sounds of birds stirring in the darkness. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table, staring at the wall, and I thought about the woman in the spare room, about her eyes, empty and broken, about the quiet way she'd talked about ending her life, about the fact that she'd come to my door looking for warmth and had found it. I didn't know if I could save her, didn't know if I could make her want to live. But I was going to try. The unraveling. The first few days with Alina were strange. She moved through the house like a ghost, quiet and unobtrusive, always trying to make herself small. She insisted on helping with chores, mending clothes and cooking meals and sweeping floors, and she refused to rest no matter how many times I told her she needed to. "You're not a guest," I said one morning, finding her at dawn in the kitchen, frying bacon and biscuits. "You're not a servant either. You can take it easy for a while." "I need to keep busy," she said, not looking at me. "If I stop, I'll think. And thinking is bad." She set down the spatula and turned to face me. "Thinking is what gets me into trouble. You see, when I think, I remember. And when I remember, I can't stop the pain." I didn't have a response to that. Couldn't find one that didn't sound hollow or meaningless. So I just nodded and sat down to eat the breakfast she'd prepared. And that's how it went, day after day. She worked tirelessly, doing everything she could to earn her keep. She cleaned every corner of the house, made the place shine for the first time in years. She helped me with the animals, learning quickly and asking questions that showed she wasn't just going through the motions. She mended my clothes, darned my socks, even patched up the old quilt Clara had made before she died. But she never talked about herself. Not about her husband, not about her daughter, not about the life she'd left behind. She'd answer direct questions with as few words as possible, then steer the conversation somewhere else. She was protecting herself, I realized, keeping the pain locked away so it couldn't escape and destroy her. And I let her, because I knew what it was like to hold something so close to your chest that it became part of you. I'd done the same thing with Clara's memory, keeping her alive in my heart while the rest of the world moved on without her. Maybe that's why we got along. We understood each other's silence. But understanding wasn't enough, not this time. The first time it happened, I was out in the barn mucking out the stalls. Alina was feeding the chickens when I heard her cry out. It wasn't a scream, not exactly. More like a gasp, sharp and startled, followed by the sound of something falling. I dropped my pitchfork and ran. She was on her knees in the yard, clutching her hand to her chest, and her face was pale as milk. The bucket she'd been carrying was on the ground next to her, water seeping into the dirt. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, unable to speak. Her hand was bleeding, a deep gash across her palm where she'd caught it on the broken edge of the bucket. "That's a bad cut," I said, gently taking her wrist to look at it. "We need to get you inside and clean it." She nodded, letting me help her up, and I supported her as we walked back to the house. The whole way she was trembling, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. When we got inside, I sat her at the table and got the first aid kit. I cleaned the wound carefully, watching her face for signs of pain. She flinched once but didn't make a sound. "You're brave," I said. "Most folks would be crying by now." "I've had worse," she said, and something in her voice made me look up. Her eyes were wet, and I realized she wasn't talking about physical pain. She was talking about everything else. "Tell me," I said softly, "tell me about your husband." She stared at me, and for a moment I thought she'd refuse. But then something broke inside her, some wall she'd been holding up for too long, and the words came pouring out. "His name was William," she said. "He was tall, taller than you, with eyes the color of honey. He sang when he worked, and he always said I was the most beautiful woman in the world." "That sounds nice," I said, wrapping her hand in clean bandages. "It was," she said. "He was kind, so kind. When we lost Martha, he held me every night and told me it wasn't my fault. He never blamed me, even when I blamed myself." "You blamed yourself." She nodded, wiping her eyes with her good hand. "I was the one who told her to marry that man. I thought he was a good match, a decent man from a good family. But he wasn't. He hurt her. And when she died, I couldn't help thinking that if I'd just been wiser, if I'd just seen through him." "Alina," I said, taking her hands, "you couldn't have known, no one could have." "But I should have," she insisted. "I was her mother. It was my job to protect her, and I failed." "Maybe," I said, "but you also gave her 26 years of love and care. You gave her memories that no one could ever take from her, and when she died, you were there with her. You didn't abandon her." She started to cry then, not the quiet tears she'd shed before, but deep, racking sobs that shook her whole body. I moved to wrap my arms around her, pulling her against my chest, holding her like I used to hold Clara in the dark days after her diagnosis. "I just want them back," she sobbed. "I want them back so badly. I'd do anything to have just one more day with them, one more hour." "I know," I said, stroking her hair. "I know, but you can't bring them back. You can only keep going." "What's the point?" she asked, and the despair in her voice cut through me like a blade. "What's the point of going on when there's nothing to look forward to, when every day is just another day of missing them?" I didn't have an answer, not a good one, so I just held her and let her cry. She fell asleep in my arms, exhausted by the effort of feeling. I carried her to her room and laid her on the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She looked so small, so fragile, like a broken bird that had lost the will to fly. I stood there for a long time, watching her sleep, wondering if she'd wake up. The next morning, she was different. Not in any obvious way. She still got up early and started working. She still tried to stay busy to keep her mind occupied. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. She was quieter, for one thing. Not just in the way she spoke, but in the way she moved, in the way she looked at things. There was a distance in her eyes, like she was seeing everything through a fog. And she'd stopped eating. At first, I thought it was just the nerves, the grief catching up with her. But after a few days, I realized she was actively avoiding food. She'd claim she wasn't hungry, or she'd eat just enough to stop me from asking questions. "You can't keep doing this," I told her one evening, pushing the plate toward her. "You need to eat." "I'm fine," she said, pushing it back. "You're not fine, you're starving yourself." "I don't have an appetite," she said, and it was true. I could see it in her face, the hollow cheeks, the dark circles under her eyes. "Then eat anyway," I said. "Your body needs fuel whether you want it or not." She looked at me then, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration. "What do you care?" she asked. What do you care if I eat or not? In a few months I'll be gone and you'll never have to think about me again. Eleanor, don't, she said, standing abruptly. Don't pretend to care. I'm not your responsibility. I'm nobody's responsibility. That's not true. It is true, she shouted, and the force of her anger surprised me. I have no one. I don't matter to anyone. I could die tomorrow and no one would even notice. I would notice, I said softly. I'd notice. She stared at me and I could see the war in her eyes, the part of her that wanted to believe me versus the part that had given up hope. She opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. You don't know me, she said finally. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me, I said. Help me understand. She stood there for a long moment, her chest heaving, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then the anger left her as quickly as it had come, and she collapsed back into her chair. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of fighting. I know, I said, sitting down across from her. I know you are. What do I do? She asked, and it was the question I'd been dreading, the one I couldn't answer. I took her hand and held it. You take it one day at a time, 1 hour at a time if that's all you can manage, and you let yourself grieve. You let yourself feel the pain, even when it feels like it's going to destroy you. How do you know? She asked. How do you know what it's like? Because I've been there, I said. When Clara died, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never feel happiness again, but I kept going. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't have a choice. She squeezed my hand. Did it get better? Eventually, I said. It never went away, but it got better, and I found reasons to keep living. Like what? I smiled. Like this ranch, like the animals I take care of, like the fact that there are still good people in the world who need help, like you. She shook her head. I'm not a reason. Yes, you are, I said. You're alive, Eleanor, you're here, that's a reason. She stared at me for a long time, and I could see her trying to hold back the tears. Finally, she gave up, and they came streaming down her face. I don't know how to do this, she said. I don't know how to live without them. You learn, I said. You learn because you have to, and you find new reasons to keep going. I don't see any reasons, she said. Then let me help you find them, I said. Just, don't give up yet, please. She nodded and I pulled her into another embrace, holding her tightly. She was still shaking, still crying, but there was something else, something that felt almost like hope. We spent the rest of the evening talking. She told me about her childhood, about the farm she grew up on, about her parents and her brothers. She told me about meeting William, about their courtship, about the wedding and the life they'd built together. And I told her about Clara, about the years we'd had, about the loss, about the loneliness that had followed. It was strange, sharing so much with someone I barely knew, but it was also healing. In some small way, it was like I was letting go of some of the weight I'd been carrying for all those years. And maybe, just maybe, it was helping her too. The rebuilding. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted, revealing the dead grass beneath. The cattle started to graze again, and the birds returned from wherever they'd gone for the winter, and the world began to wake up. Eleanor didn't wake up with it. She was still grieving, still lost in her own darkness, but something had shifted. The change was subtle, so subtle that I almost missed it. She was eating again, not much, but enough. She was sleeping through the night without waking up in tears, and she'd stopped talking about leaving. But the real change came in the garden. One morning, I found her outside, digging in the dirt with a spade. She'd found the sack of seeds I'd left in the shed and was planting them in rows, working with a focus that bordered on obsession. What are you doing? I asked, walking over to her. Planting, she said, not looking up. I figured it was time. Time for what? She stopped digging and straightened up, wiping the sweat from her brow. Time to start something new, something that has a chance of growing. I looked at her hands, caked with dirt, and at her face streaked with it. She looked a mess, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Can I help?" I asked. She smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen from her. "I'd like that." We spent the morning planting together, working in companionable silence. The sun was warm on our backs, and the soil was soft and rich. It felt good to be outside, to be doing something that didn't involve grief or loss or the weight of the past. When we were done, Elena stood back and surveyed our work. "It's not much," she said, "but it's a start." "It's more than a start," I said. "It's a beginning, a new one." She nodded slowly, and I could see her thinking about that. I've been so focused on what I lost that I forgot to think about what I could still have. "Like what?" I asked. She turned to me, and there was something in her expression that I hadn't seen before. Gratitude, surprise, or maybe just the realization that there was still life left in her. "Like the fact that I'm alive," she said. "Like the fact that I can still work, still help, still make a difference. Like the fact that there are people who care about me." "You mean that?" I asked, surprised. "Of course I do," she said. "You've been incredible, Sam. You took in a broken stranger and gave her hope. You don't know how much that means to me." "I think I do," I said, and I meant it. We stood there for a moment, looking at the garden we'd planted together. The seeds were buried deep, but they were there. They just needed time to grow. "Do you think they'll survive?" Elena asked, and I knew she wasn't just talking about the seeds. "I think they will," I said, "if we take care of them, if we give them what they need." She nodded, and I saw her swallow hard. "I want to stay," she said, "if that's all right with you." "Stay?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "Stay here permanently?" "If you'll have me," she said. "I know I don't have anything to offer, but I can work. I can help with the ranch, with the animals, with whatever needs to be done. I'll do anything." "Elena," I said, turning to face her fully, "you don't have to work. You can stay because you want to stay, because you're welcome here." "Why?" she asked, and the question was the same one she'd asked me that first night. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't about her unworthiness. It was about genuine curiosity. "Because I want you to stay," I said. "Because you've become important to me. Because I care about you, Elena. I care about you a lot." She stared at me, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was trying to figure out how to respond, trying to find the words to express what she was feeling. I reached out and took her hand. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "Just stay, that's enough." She squeezed my hand, and for a moment there were no words between us. Just the warmth of the sun, the scent of the earth, and the knowledge that something had changed. The months that followed were some of the best of my life. Elena threw herself into the ranch, working alongside me every day. She learned to ride, to herd cattle, to mend fences. She became stronger, healthier, more alive than I'd ever seen her. And she started to smile again. It wasn't constant. The grief was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to spring out when she least expected it. But she'd learned to live with it, to carry it without letting it destroy her. And she'd found reasons to keep going. One evening, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Elena was quiet, her hands folded in her lap, and I could tell she was thinking about something. "What is it?" I asked. She sighed, a long, slow breath that seemed to carry some of the weight she'd been carrying for so long. "I was thinking about William," she said, "and Martha, about how much I miss them." "I know," I said. "I still miss Clara even after all these years." "I used to think I couldn't live without them," she continued. "I used to think that life wasn't worth living if they weren't in it. But now—" She paused and I waited. "Now I think maybe they would want me to keep going," she said. "Maybe they would want me to find happiness, even if it's without them." "I think they would," I said. "I think that's exactly what they'd want." She turned to me and I saw the tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness, not anymore. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, you did more than that. You gave me hope when I didn't have any. You gave me a reason to keep living. You gave me a second chance." "I didn't do anything special," I said, embarrassed by her praise. "Maybe not," she said, "but you did it anyway, and that's what matters." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull away. We sat there watching the sunset, and I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the same as the peace I'd had with Clara, it couldn't be. But it was something real. That night before I went to bed, I stopped by the spare room and knocked on the door. "Alina," I said, "can I talk to you?" She opened the door, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked so beautiful in the candlelight that I almost forgot what I wanted to say. "What is it?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I know this is sudden," I said, "and I know we've only known each other for a few months, but I need to tell you something." She waited, her eyes searching my face. "I love you," I said, "not just as a friend. I love you, Alina, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." She stared at me, and for a long moment I was terrified I'd made a mistake, that I'd pushed too hard, too fast, too soon. Then she smiled. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while now, I just didn't know how to say it." "Is that a yes?" I asked. "It's a yes," she said. "It's a yes." I pulled her into my arms, holding her close, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt whole. But that's not the end of the story, of course. The ending is never really the ending. It's just a new beginning. We built a life together. Alina and I, it wasn't always easy. Nothing in life is. We had our struggles, our disagreements, our moments of doubt. But we also had each other. And that made all the difference. Alina found a new purpose, a new reason to get up in the morning. She threw herself into the ranch, becoming my partner in every sense of the word. She helped me build it into something we could both be proud of, something that would last long after we were both gone. And she finally found peace. The scars from her past never fully healed, of course. They never do, but they faded, becoming part of her story rather than the whole of it. She learned to laugh again, to love again, to live again. And I learned the same. Sometimes, late at night, we'd sit on the porch and talk about the past, about William and Martha and Clara, about all the people we'd lost. And we'd cry just a little, but we'd also smile, because we knew they would want us to be happy. We were survivors, both of us, and surviving was enough. The garden she planted that first spring grew and flourished. Every year it came back stronger, more beautiful than the last, and every year we'd look at it and remember how it all began. With a woman who had nothing left to live for, and a cowboy who gave her something to hope for.